What's up, folks? And welcome to call number 8. We've been on a journey. So, for this call, I'd like to talk about BDSM. BDSM, kink. It's kind of I feel like it can sound like a scary word that I feel like it can sound really intense. And it doesn't have to be. It can be intense, but it doesn't have to be. Um, Yeah, so I'll break down some different elements of what BDSM means and what it means to be kinky and ways to play with that. So, I'll talk about kinkiness. I guess I've come to conceptualize the BDSM community often refers to themselves as the kink community or kinksters. But what I've come to appreciate about being kinky, because I would definitely consider myself kinky, is something to the effect of when I'm playing with a partner, playing intimately or sexually with a partner, my only priorities are that we're both in consent and that we're following what feels good. And then if those are the only two parameters, then anything is possible. Because that means essentially those two parameters alone opens up the space for all of our conditioning to be thrown out the window of you're supposed to do this, you're not supposed to do this, and actually lets things get as weird as they want to be, because I don't know, it's my belief that we're all pretty weird, and I think it's fun to discover that. So BDSM is an acronym and stands for, the B is bondage, DS is dominance, submission, and then the SM, I know that's two S's, but SM is sadomasochism. So the way that acronym is broken down, there are three elements to it. And I mean, I think this is a good framework to talk about BDSM, but it can be much more complex than that. I read a book, I have it right here actually. It's kind of interesting. It's called Sacred Kink. I don't know if I don't know that I don't know that I'd recommend it per se, just because I wasn't totally crazy about the writing style, and it felt like a bit of a slog to get through. But it had some valuable, I had some takeaways from it. But essentially, the only reason I wanted to bring it up here is the person who wrote this book had a different framework than bondage, dominance, submission, and sadomasochism. This person had 9 different categories of kink, and their whole thing was using it with ritual and making it into a sacred act. Some pretty out there stuff. Pretty cool, but some pretty out there stuff too. But anyways, the only reason I bring that up is all frameworks are arbitrary. Right, we have all frameworks are doing is life is this infinitely complex splungle of stuff, and a framework is just cutting it into different sections so that we can talk about it. But no framework can ever encapsulate everything. And similarly, BDSM is a framework around one aspect of sexuality, and it can't encapsulate everything. There. So, bondage. Bondage it's kind of interesting to me that that's one of the major things in BDSM. But bondage, very simply put, is very simply put, is one person has their mobility restricted, and that could look so many different ways. Having your mobility restricted, very simply, maybe you get some nice fuzzy handcuffs, and or whatever, and your partner handcuffs your arms to the corners of the bed and your legs to the corners of the bed so you can't move. That's one form of bondage. Some people are really into rope, of getting tied up, in very intricate and artistic ways. And there's also, you can do I learned this in a workshop, but you can get a pillowcase, and if you just put your partner's arms behind their back and put a pillowcase up it, their arms are a pillow, then they can't move their arms. So anyways, the point is some people find it incredibly arousing to have their mobility restricted and to not be able to move. You're giving up, it's a huge act of surrender. And I know a lot of people who love being tied up because it creates a state of bliss where like they don't have to worry about moving. They don't have to worry about their body. They have someone else completely taking care of their body, and they can just absolutely relax and surrender and fall into this river of bliss. A lot of people like bondage for being tied up for that reason. And people can like tying up for for many reasons, but maybe it's the control, maybe it's like the artistry of it, maybe it's having another person trust them a lot. That's the main thing about BDSM is so much of it is about trust. Like, yeah, you can get into some pretty like out there ways of interacting, but ultimately what it comes down to is creating different situations where you have to trust your partner incredibly deeply. And that's pretty cool because that creates a lot of intimacy. There's a BDSM coach, teacher in Seattle named Max, and one thing he often says is the reason he likes kink and BDSM is because in his view, it is the most direct route into intimacy with another person. Also, I'm going to put this hat on. I feel like it goes with my t-shirt, and I just saw it, and I'm growing out my hair, and so I'm needing to get hats, I'm realizing, for the in-between phase. But that's neither here nor there. Yeah, BDSM, bondage. I'll say I don't have a ton of experience with bondage, personally, but I find it intriguing. I would like to learn more about rope. One other aspect to bondage is, well, this is a whole nother world, but I have heard terms of like psychological bondage before too, where actually no, let's just keep it to the physical. We'll keep it to physical bondage. There's all kinds of different psychological play that I find more compelling, that I find at least like draws me in more, but maybe that'll come up in these different letter breakdowns. So anyways, B, bondage. Some people really like being tied up or tying other people up. And if that's something you want to play with, like, it's really easy to play with. You can use the pillowcase. You can go to any sex shop and get like very like cheap amateur like wrist cuffs and ankle cuffs, but they work great. You can get bondage tape. It's like $7. It looks like duct tape, but it's not duct tape. It like sticks to itself, and it's thin and it doesn't hurt. And you can get pretty creative with it. You can even use saran wrap. But you have to be careful with saran wrap. If you're gonna use it, you should look up how to do it. There's like special ways how to do it. But yeah, some people like want to be mummified. And anyways, all these things, I'm not sure how they sound to you. I guess it depends your exposure to this kind of stuff or your own desired template that you've explored. Some of these things may sound out there to you. And I think the main thing of like being willing to go into the weird spaces of sexuality, and I don't mean weird demeaningly, I mean weird as in outside of like the very narrow mainstream. It requires the ability to do what I was saying at the beginning. Like, if your only goals are to be in consent and to do what feels good, if you can really hold on to that, you might be able to discover that you can go to new places that were previously covered up by taboo or by like societies not acknowledging that area or something. Okay, DS, dominant submission. This is well, I love this part. This is a part of sexuality that I find really interesting. And the way I'd pretty much break it down is power. There's some great Oscar Wilde quote. I'm definitely going to mess it up. Let me see if I can remember it. He said, all of life... I think the quote is something like this. First of all, I don't really know very much about Oscar Wilde, but I just know he's some famous person and that he made this quote, I should say. I should not make myself seem smarter or more knowledgeable than I am. But I like the quote. And the quote was, everything in life is about sex, except for sex, which is about power. Something like that. He probably phrased it like a little more cleverly, but I thought that was really funny. So, power. Let me talk about first. Okay, I'm gonna take a slight detour into power and talk about yin and yang. And if you're following this, great. If it feels like it's hard to track what I'm saying, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. But I'm gonna try anyways. So yin and yang. Lots of traditions will call... So yin and yang, the basic idea is there's two fundamental energies that make up all of the universe. Again, this is a framework. This is a framework that's breaking down all life, all interaction, all existence, and slicing the pie into just two very simple energies. yin and yang. And the idea is the idea is that, like, again, it acknowledges it's a framework, though, that life itself is infinitely whole, infinitely complete. But we're using these two energies to look at life, because, like, without a framework, you can't actually look at the whole picture. Like, it requires having contrast in order to see. Like, you couldn't, if a room was perfectly lit, if there's like 100% light in a room, you couldn't see like this mouse sitting on a table if everything was 100% light. But once you have shadow, then you can actually see how the mouse contrasts with its surroundings. And so the yin and yang is the same idea. It is creating a contrast so that we can look at different interplays of life and energy. Even that aside, though, you can just look at it as like two fundamental energies. And a lot of traditions, I'm gonna have to caveat this, but a lot of traditions, instead of yin, they say feminine energy. Instead of yang, they say masculine energy. I hate that terminology. I'm only bringing it up because some people might have. Well, I guess I'm bringing it up, one, because I want to dispel it, but two, because some people might already have mental models related to those words that I can tie to. And then the only other words I know are, there's a teacher I've worked with. His name's Justin Patrick Pierce, and he has a partner named London Angel Winters. But they teach like sacred sexuality stuff. But they use the words, instead of yin, they say omega, and instead of yang, they say alpha. So the basic idea here is that yang. And the reason I don't like masculine and feminine, to me it just seems so stupid to use those words. Like, why put a gender on it? Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. And it just like feels like it creates norms around what it means to be manly or womanly, and that men have to be masculine and women have to be feminine. But like, I'm not gonna get into it. I'm just gonna say, like, I think those words are outdated and stupid, and like, especially with how complex gender is and how that's really rising to social awareness, that gender need not be binary. It just seems like they seem like foolish words to use, and that's a beef I have with the general like sacred sexuality and tantra community, is they all use like sacred masculine and sacred feminine as words, which I don't like. So I'm going to use yin and yang. So anyways, yang is, okay, general idea is like, if you have a cup, let's say you have water, and then you put your water in a cup. This is a metaphor. The cup, the thing holding it, is the yang, and the water inside of the cup is the yin. Okay, so the idea here is that yang, in its basis form, is that which holds. People who meditate, there's an idea that yang is like the state of consciousness or awareness. It's like the big, empty infinite that holds all of life inside of it. And then in that framework, or in that way of looking at things, yin, people will say on like that deep kind of a esoteric level, is the light, or the form within the consciousness. So there's this big consciousness, and then there's like form that happens within it. So if you're a meditator, you're meditating, your eyes are shut, you feel this big, wide, empty space, that's the yang, and then you have all these thoughts and emotions that are popping up inside of it, that's the yin. Okay? So again, the yang is the thing holding the yin, which is the expression inside of it. So that's like a very zoomed out way of looking at it. We can zoom in, again, like, I shouldn't say again, I haven't said this before, but I view life to be, everything to be a microcosm and or macrocosm of everything else. So that means that my belief is that all patterns that exist on one level of life exist on all levels of life. So another level of looking at this yin-yang paradigm is, well, let me see. Okay, I'll give one more example and then we'll go back there. But let's say this is so prevalent for me because I've spent a lot of time coaching or holding space for people. Holding space. Let's say I'm speaking with you, and I'm guiding the conversation. I'm here. Let's say I'm coaching you, and I'm here to help you see what's inside of yourself. So I'm guiding the conversation. I'm taking care of time. You don't have to worry about anything. I'm asking the questions. I'm steering. You say something, you cry, I hold you, or like I'm there to support your crying. All I am is I'm like this bounds in this big space, and I'm navigating skillfully in order to like help you open up inside of that space. Or like, so like so anyways, me holding, that's the yang, the cup, and then you like opening up, feeling your emotions, seeing what's inside of there, that's the yin. Same thing like therapist, yang, client, yin. Massage therapist, yang, client, yin. That's just the basic idea that when one person's holding a space or container and the other is expressing inside of it. And I'll give one more example here, which is... Oh, yeah. So again, if you're shutting your eyes and you want to be in a yang space, you can close your eyes and you can see. There's always thoughts coming up. There's always emotions coming up. There's always this rich world of things happening inside of your psyche. If you want to be in a yang space, you just sit there and you don't react. Just notice and then return to the void. Notice and return to the void. If you want to be in a yin space, there's a lot of ways to do that, but like for me, like let's say I'm feeling something right now, instead of just noticing, oh, I feel a little bit of angst, like what would it be like to go into the feeling and to let the feeling express itself? So I could be like, right? So like dance or singing or song or like art, expression, creativity is very yin, and then that which holds is the yang. So why am I talking about all this? Well, that fundamental framework is pretty much the basis of sacred sexuality, and the idea being that in an intimate interaction, at any given point, you're either in a yang energetic space or a yin energetic space, and the idea is if you are in a very deep yang, you will polarize your partner into a very deep yin, or vice versa. And the idea behind sacred sexuality is that the most sparks, the chemistry, the fire, the passion occurs in polarity when one person is in a very deep yang and one person's in a very deep yin. And again, there's an idea of like agility. You don't have to stay in that space. You know, I could be yang one moment. Like let's say we're making out and I take you by the nape of your neck and then I put you on the bed. Like what's happening is I am controlling the scene, and I am leading, guiding, holding the scene, and then maybe all of a sudden, and I'm in power there, and maybe all of a sudden then it switches, and then you start to like guide our kissing, and all of a sudden I'm following you, and like yes, it can be like this interplay that goes back and forth very quickly, but the idea is at any given moment there is always one person holding or guiding or leading or in power, and another who is following or surrendering, yang and yin. Okay, so if you followed that, great. If you didn't follow that, no worries. So, bringing this back to BDSM. So, S&M, MS. DS. DS. Dominant submissive. So my viewing of dominant submissive is ultimately, yeah, it's all about power, but it's almost just to me an exaggeration of yang and yin. So the dominant is the person in power, and the submissive is the person not in power. It's so, playing with power I find to be incredibly enjoyable. One is the submissive, because giving up power can feel so good. There is just something so deeply cathartic about giving my power to somebody else. And there's a lot of ways to do it. There's so many ways to play with it. Like, you can use hypnosis. Erotic hypnosis is a thing. I'm reading a book on that right now. Just like, that's one way for a partner to like almost get inside the other partner's mind, which is not for everyone, but I find really interesting. That's one way to play with it. You can do like kind of a servitude dynamic. If I'm like, hey, partner, Sam, go get me a glass of water. Whatever, like you could create a container where I'm just telling you what to do and you're just doing it. That can be really hot for some people. Maybe like I'm in power and I want you to worship me. I want you to worship my body or worship my sexuality, whatever. There's a lot of ways to play with power. And anyways, it's hot. It can be very hot to give up power, to be in that state of surrender. There's actually a space called subspace, which essentially what it is when you get so deep into being a submissive, like it's almost like your mind is gone and you're in just this blissed out trance state where you will do whatever the other person says. And like there's still a part in you where you can consent is still a thing. And I will talk about safe words, I will probably talk about that next time. So consent is always the thing. You can always, even if you're in deep subspace, your partner should be aware and should be more aware that consent becomes a little more blurry when you're in a subspace, and that's why negotiation is really important. So, anyways, DS and being in power. Being in power can be so fun. Like, it can be so empowering, and like it can feel so good to tell somebody what to do, or to control their body in a certain way, or to, yeah, that can be really fun too. And again, if you're playing with any of these things, number one rule, consent. Number one rule is that you and your partner are on the same page. Your communication is good. I probably should have talked about safe words first, but I'll talk about it next time. And that you have a safe word established if things get too intense, or you want to change the scene at all, where you can shift the scene. So, yeah, that's just playing with power. But playing with power can also be really subtle too. It can be just like, I'm on top, we're making out, me and my partner are making out, I'm on top of her, and like, she's trying to kiss me, and I'm not letting her. I'm teasing her a little bit. I'm making her like go for it, but I'm never giving it to her. And then I grab her face and I'm saying, "You want to kiss me, don't you?" And she says, "Yeah," and she really does. And I get really close, and then she's like anticipating, and I don't let her. And I get really close, and she's anticipating. I give her the smallest kiss, and then I pull back. And then I pull back. Okay, so that was just like a really miniature scene where like clearly I'm in power there. And that's really fun. I'm evoking her desire. I'm teasing her. It's fun assuming she likes it also. And that's just, the idea there is playing with power can also be really subtle. And it can, but you can, if you let yourself sink into it, it can be so pleasurable. Great. And yeah, so many ways to play with power. I guess the last thing I'll say is it doesn't have to be sexual even either. Like, maybe you want to feel like a baby and you want your partner to feel like a parent. Or maybe you want to feel like a little puppy and you want your partner to treat you like a puppy. You want your partner to even put a collar on you. Or maybe that's too intense, but maybe it's not. Put a collar on you and scratch you behind the ears and walk you around the room and tell you you're being a good dog. Maybe that just feels good. Maybe it is sexual, but maybe it's not. Maybe it just lets you go to this like really deeply surrendered place. Okay, and then SM, sadomasochism. So in theory, sadomasochism is ultimately about pain, which is to say, if you're a sadist, you like delivering pain. If you're a masochist, you like receiving pain. And yeah, giving or receiving pain. And yeah, but I would actually reframe it as appreciating intense sensation. So like, I actually do like pain, but so I'll give it on the masochist side first. If you like intense sensation, maybe it's incredibly intense pleasure that's like almost hard to bear. Maybe it actually is getting spanked or getting scratched or getting bitten. There's something about those feelings that just like the intensity of them feels good, even though it's painful, it feels good. Even being tickled can be incredibly intense. So essentially it's just like, is there part of you that enjoys receiving incredibly intense sensation? Because the thing about intense sensation is when it's really intense, again, your mind goes out the window and you're just so present with your body. And then some people like delivering very intense sensation, sadists. Some people like it because, I mean, everyone's got their own reason, of course, but some people like the control maybe. But especially if you're delivering pain, it can be kind of cathartic. So I have a flogger right here, which is a fun toy. I don't know if you can see it. Yeah, which is a fun toy. And for me, it's actually not a sexual toy. It probably could be, but like, you have one person essentially just getting whapped in the back over and over again. Maybe it sounds violent, maybe it doesn't too. But you get whapped in the back over and over again, and that's to me like a great. There's many toys. Not everyone likes flogging, but it's as a bottom, a person receiving that, it can be so cathartic. You just get tranced out in this like right in the center of your back, and your mind is gone. And with flogging specifically, a lot of people have these huge emotional openings and this huge catharsis, and tears will come out because maybe it's something about, I don't know if this aligns with your worldview. A lot of people say it because it's hitting you on the back of the heart chakra. Maybe, maybe not. But anyways, point being, like, there's something about the rhythmic trance and just the consistent sensation that can allow people to completely release. And that can be really fun to deliver too, of watching another person like squirm or have an intense reaction to your power. And there can be something very cathartic also about just like unleashing your own energy on another person. And the last thing I'll say is doing anything BDSM related even if you're doing tame BDSM, but especially the more intense you get, it requires you to confront your own shadow. It requires you to say, like, wow, there is a part of me that wants to receive pain, or there is a part of me that wants to give pain. And to me, that is a fundamental part of being a human. That's one reason I love BDSM, is because it's forcing me to look at myself. Like, let's take Nazi Germany. Like, Hitler, yes, sure, he was an evil dude. But all these people who were just Nazi German citizens, we could have been that, right? Like, these were people that were being compelled to do... essentially, the point I'm making is we all have a Hitler within us. We all have... And that's why people in Nazi Germany were able to be swept up by it, or not stand up against the peer pressure of it, or whatever. We all have that in us. Or the Stanford Prison Experiment. God, if you haven't seen that, there's a movie on it, but it's also just a study that happened back in like the 70s. Essentially, there was a bunch of college students, and Philip Zimbardo was the professor. He randomly assigned students to be guards in a fake prison, or to be prisoners. And what ended up happening, they made this fake prison, they started getting really into it. The guards started abusing the prisoners and just getting so into character, and the prisoners were also getting very into character. And the point that drew for me was like, holy shit, we all have this in us. We all have a fucking animal in us. We all have a beast within us. We all have like a dictator in us. We all have darkness and different kinds of violence and evilness even. And we all also have the part of us that does want to be the prisoner, that is like the cult follower, that wants to give our power away. In my opinion, we all have the full spectrum of humanity in us, and most of us don't take the time to actually look at what's in there. And I think, to be a human doing my due diligence, I should be looking at what's in there, because I want to be prepared for when that gets called upon in real life, that I've seen it and I can interact with it. So if I'm in a situation where I have a lot of power, I don't want to abuse it. I want to be very familiar with using my power, or very familiar with giving up my power. That's one just like personal growth reason I'm interested in BDSM, other than I think it's fun and sexy. Yeah, looking at your shadow. And yeah, I'll say the last thing too, like, even with BDSM, like, one thing I like to do with partners, I've mentioned before, is like I love sexy fight energy. I love feeling like we're two animals fighting. And even that's been a shadow opening too. Like the part of me that's like aggressive and vicious and wants to eat, bite, or like feels like a werewolf, wants to like eat another person, wants to even kill them with my teeth. That's in me. And I like giving safe and consensual spaces for that part of myself to express itself, so I can feel it, so I can see it, so I can work with it. And it just feels good to express myself. Even the parts of myself that are dark or shadowy, in some ways those feel the best, because those have been repressed for the longest and with the heaviest repression. Cool. That's all I got. BDSM, great for personal growth, great for shadow work, great for intimacy, can be sexy, good if you want to just explore your sexuality and see what's in there. Boom. Okay. I'll see you guys tomorrow. And I gotta talk about safe words. That's important. Peace.